So the army here was King Arthur's army was going to be staffed entirely by nobles. And the boss didn't like this idea because this type of thing has ended tragically in the past. Um, one of the one of the classic examples of this was the Charge of the Light Brigade, where you had people who were minor nobles and royalty and bought commissions in the army and then did some disastrous decisions, um, which led to a whole bunch of people riding horses into cannon fire and just dying horribly. So, right around the time the boss went back to King Arthur's time, the British government was getting rid of buying the commissions. You still had the officers and the enlisted, which was very much a nobles and peasants thing, and is in even the modern US military, where you have officers and you have enlisted. And there's higher requirements for officers, usually like a college education, or often there's even distinctions in officers who rose up from the ranks of enlisted versus officers who just went to West Point or went to Annapolis or went to Colorado Springs. And there's kind of a class distinction. A lot of that's going away, but there is still some of that. But this all comes down to the idea of the nobility and the peasants. And if you're to take a look at, wars through the histories, the Hundred Years' War has some great examples of that, where you have the British and the French, and you have the knights, and the knights go and fight, and then you have all the peasants. And the peasant armies are, the peasant armies do a lot of the fighting, but it's a lot of knights running at each other, knights running at each other. And, the peasants fight. And one of the things that disturbed, angered the French nobility was that the English peasants had longbows. Now, the longbow of the era had 120 pound pull, maybe even higher. And so it was able to put an arrow through their fancy plate mail. So they had this nice armor that would stop sword blows, that would stop most of damage hitting them. But because the British had these longbows and had steel-tipped arrows, they were able to pierce through the armor. And so the French knights were like, this isn't fair. You can't kill peasants can't kill nobles. But it's war, and so the only unfair battle is the one you lose. So so there was this class distinction, and the boss had this idea of, okay, I'm going to dial this up to 11. So he had all of these princes who are sons of the king and sons of the sons of the king, that sort of thing, where here they are, they're sitting around doing nothing but collecting money from the government. And the boss is like, I have so many other places I can use this money for. And every time Arthur brings it up, every time he brings it up to Arthur, Arthur's like, no, this is our right. This is our. And the boss is like, I have an idea. I'll give them something that they want more, and they'll give it up voluntarily. And so he comes up with this idea, and we'll see how it works to get all the little princelings to move over and join this army, which also has a kind of advantage that he can use this as, the term is cannon fodder, where the idea is that, okay, if he uses this not so clever army, uses this army of people who don't understand military conflict, don't understand guns, don't understand all of that stuff. They just want to be the knights on the horses charging at other knights on horses. Then, eventually he's going to run out of them. And his army is going to be better. So he's saying, okay, we'll make this army that's pure officers. Lieutenant, captain, all the way up to field marshal. And then he's going to have this other army that's all privates and corporals and sergeants, which are not officers. But you still have this sort of sense of hierarchy where you have the privates reporting to the corporals and the corporals reporting to the sergeants. And maybe you can have different levels of sergeants. So you can go up to, oh yes, this is a sergeant, and this is a gunnery sergeant, and this is a master sergeant, and this is a first sergeant, and this is I don't know if I have the order of those right. Someone who's into militaria can correct me. But there are different layers of non-commissioned officer, of enlisted officers. And so these in modern militaries are the sort of organizational brains, the people who know the field, while the officers are the ones who deal more with the general strategy of things. The sergeant can be the bad guy. The sergeant can organize the people and say, okay, you 5 over there and you 5 over there, while the lieutenant can worry about what the other lieutenants are doing, what his other sergeants are doing, and work and communicate with them. So you can have this sort of hierarchy, but everything down on the field level is controlled by the non-coms. And so it sounds like the boss is going to just try and do this and build up the extra layers of enlisted. So that'll probably work well. And so he has other people distracted, and distracting people is a very good thing to do. There are times in your life where you need to get stuff done. And there are people who are more interested in having their way than in getting stuff done. And they will fight you, and they will insist on being in charge, and they will make your life miserable. And so what the trick is to do is you give them something unimportant to do. But it has to look important. It has to look. The trick is you give them something that looks important, and then you do the stuff that is important. I've often said it's more important to get stuff done than to get credit. Because hopefully, when the things are actually done, a good boss, a good manager, will realize who the person doing the work is. And that's where a lot of the payoff comes. And one of the things for being a good manager is knowing who is actually doing the work. Because if you are a bad manager and you look at the flashy people, so when you're in charge of people and you see somebody who's like, oh, look at what I did, look at what I did, look at what I did, there's a good chance they may not actually have done that. Or they may be taking credit for other people's work. And people like that, people who take credit for other people's work, are a total catastrophe waiting to happen. They are like a ticking time bomb, because they may not know enough to know what's a good thing to steal credit for. And if you start relying on them, you may go all in on something that's a very bad idea. So look for the people who actually do the work. Those are the important things. Those are the important things in life. Who cares credit?